Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Creative Writers and Illustrators. And my guests for the day are Adrian Pinder and Maya Ramaswamy, creators of this beautiful picture book about the humpback marcia, which is critically endangered. The book is published by Talking Cub. So let's find out more. Welcome, Adrian. Welcome, Maya.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Adrian,
thank you.
Adrian, when did you realize the humpback marcia needed a picture book? Because you have been instrumental in, you've been with the fish for over a decade. You've been through its journey of declaring it critically endangered, and you've been part of the Mercy Trust and the Kaveri initiative, which goes into schools and educates children.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, despite a lot of effort along the way by the Marcia Trust to visit schools and to run education outings as well in the field, it wasn't really till Maya contacted me out of the blue, introduced herself as a wildlife illustrator, and asked me whether I'd ever considered writing a children's book about marcia. And it took me about 10 seconds to think about this and realized what a fantastic idea it was. Here was an opportunity to raise awareness of rivers and fish with kids, not just in India, but around the world.
Right. So I think it's a wonderful idea, Maya, that you suggested, and I'm so happy with the final result. So every page in this picture book has successfully captured the flora and fauna along the Kaveri River. So what was your approach towards designing these pages?
Very close to the Kaveri River, and my family, we've been patients because we're so with that. That's about the only thing, like how people go to the beach in Chennai or something like that, or in Mumbai. We just go to the forest or the river, and we don't really have anything else in Bangalore. So I'm comfortable with the river, and so I mean, it's just I guess it reflects in my work.
Adrian, the humpback marcia is the tiger of the river. So why did you choose to name the fish Matisha, which is an unusual name? I mean, it means the goddess.
That's right. Yeah. So that was a fun part of the process. I mean, I'd never written a children's book before, but I realized that I needed a character. And in terms of choosing a name, what I did, I just went onto Google and I searched for Indian girls' names. And I wanted a name that girls' names beginning with the letter M. And I wanted to try and find a name that was consistent with the fact that the River Kaveri has sacred status as goddess Kaveri. And I came across the name Matisha, which translates as goddess. So yeah, we have Matisha, the marcia, a goddess, and that's where it came from.
Nice. Maya, was drawing Matisha limiting or was it liberating? I ask you this question because there's very little, very limited angles you can, create for a fish because they have no limbs, and you've drawn, for picture books, children, as far as picture books go, you've illustrated the bears and turtles and, animals, creatures with limbs, and a lot of creative freedom is available to, actually illustrate. But what about Matisha? Because most of these spreads, like you are forced to kind of focus, the lengthwise angle of the fish.
That's a very good question. Simple forms are definitely challenging when they're the protagonist in a story. And yeah, I had to, but because I respect every creature, even if it was, I did a book on a little frog, but like you say, frogs do have limbs, and so they have angles, and it's easier to show them in different angles interestingly. And this was a challenge in that way, but because I really felt I was a fish while I was illustrating it, I just went with it, and I hope it's come out interesting enough on every page, despite its simple form.
Right. I think that's an interesting perspective, as an artist, to consider yourself a fish, and then the entire scenario changes the way you kind of design those spreads. Adrian, you've mentioned the Marcia in the book. You've mentioned the Marcia faces threats from humans at every stage of its life, right? So do you think development and the conservation of rivers to keep the humpback Marcia safe can go hand in hand?
Simple answer to that is no. When there were fewer humans on the planet, and we had large coverage of forests, yes, all species could coexist in harmony. But with rapid population growth of humans and the development of cities, that puts an enormous stress on rivers. So no, I don't think the two things can go hand in hand, but what I think we can do is we can mitigate some of those threats by living more sustainably, by not chopping down forests, replanting forests, and recycling a more sustainable use of water. So we have to do what we can to limit our impact on the environment.
Maya, the river Kaveri appears as a silent character throughout the book, right? It has no dialogues, and yet the way you portrayed water, it kind of the river it conveys mood of the river. The water is never completely blue, it's never totally green, but the changing hues kind of depict its character. So can you tell me more about the way you designed the river Kaveri? Because it's such an integral part. I mean, there's no Kaveri, there's no Marcia.
I'm so happy you've noticed the way the water has been treated. That actually goes to show your sensitivity to what the illustrators try to do. And yes, the water depends on the light that is on it. And when you're in the water, if you're swimming in the water, or you in a boat along the riverside, or you're sitting by the bank, the water's color depends entirely on the light on it, and also from your perspective of which angle you're sitting at. So when it rains, for example, it definitely turns very gray and dim, and I tried to just it's a living being. The river itself is a living thing. It's not just water. And I find it very scary when people just build concrete banks along rivers and remove all the sand, and then they expect the river to be a river. It doesn't work like that. It's a living thing. It needs living banks. It needs the sand in it. And it's very important for us to recognize. That's why we named our rivers. We gave them goddess names. That's why our rivers have the names of goddesses, is because they're alive, and we should recognize that.
I think that's an interesting and important piece of information that you have given, not concretizing the banks of a river, because the banks of a river are so essential for river life. Right, Adrian? You'd like to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, Maya's absolutely right. I mean, for rivers to function and do what rivers need to do, they need to be left in their natural state. And what we must remember is we need rivers. We can't survive without rivers. There's only so much fresh water on the planet, and without fresh water, we wouldn't be here.
Right. So you've been catering to adults, because you're a scientist, you write a lot of articles, books, and research papers. Was it easy breaking down the science jargon to write a picture book?
it's a very different process. I've been writing and publishing my work in international scientific journals for over 25 years. And that's a really quite a slow process. Every single sentence needs to be qualified with evidence, and then it has to go through a vigorous peer review process to decide whether or not it's fit for publication. So yeah, it's a very long and detailed process, scientific writing. I didn't need to adapt any jargon really. It was just really quite beautiful to be able to write in a very simplistic style and sort of bring emotion and other things into the, and description into my writing, and I found it a real joy to do. Actually, I really enjoyed it,
because I think through the text you added layers to what Maya has illustrated in the book, you know, and that's I think that's so integral when you write books for children.
yeah.
Maya, you believe kids should observe nature as a naturalist than artist. So do you think kids have this inherent quality to be a naturalist? I mean, what are the qualities of being a naturalist?
I think kids are naturally very attracted to their environment and to observe it very carefully, especially between the ages of 3 or 4, when they're able to start walking. And between that and the age of 15, children pick up whatever is in their environment very, very acutely. They're conscious of it. And unfortunately, in urban areas, if they grow up in an apartment complex with only cars around them, they're able to identify all the cars and all the gadgets that they see around them. So if instead they were taken to a bird watching, or if they were taken to, with the naturalist who showed them the trees, the native trees, and those features were described, or even just shown to the children, they would pick up all of these things with the exact same detail as they do anything else, like gadgets, for example, nowadays. So it's very important to expose children to nature at a young age. And I do wish that instead of clogging the cities, I wish we could all just turn rural again and go and live in our small towns and villages, and just observe nature more closely and try to be more organic in our lifestyle.
I think that's the need of the hour, and I really hope in an ideal world we could do this, but yeah, at least we'll have to make an effort. Adrian, do you think it is important to sensitize children about sharing Earth's resources and living in harmony with other creatures on this planet?
I think it's absolutely essential. And I mean, as I mentioned earlier, if we don't do this, we can't survive as a species. Humans won't be here in the future. And the book actually starts off with that message. It reads, all life on Earth needs water to survive and grow. Without water, there would be no trees, no animals, and no people. So if we abuse our rivers, then we as a species are finished, quite simply. We need fresh water to drink and to water crops. So if we abuse our rivers, yeah, that's the end of us. So educating kids at an early age about these things is critical, really. And getting the message across to kids at that early age means that they can then educate their parents, but also later when they grow up, they can provide that same messaging to their own children as well. And that's kind of been lost a lot along the way with rapid development and what Maya was talking about, how kids, they recognize all the gadgets around them and the stuff that's really not important to our long-term futures. But it's nature that keeps us alive, and people need to realize and respect that.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important message for all humans, especially parents. Maya, do you think illustrations can be used as a tool to promote conservation? Because when it comes to critically endangered species, we don't have much awareness. I mean, it was only when I read this picture book, I became aware that the humpback marcia was critically endangered.
Yes, I think illustration attracts your attention in a way that nothing else can. And it's very important for illustrators to use their naturalist skills to communicate whatever it is they want to communicate. But I wish that people, for example, photographers, it's illustration is very slow, very meticulous type of work. But I wish, for example, photographers who have hundreds of images, in an hour of work, I wish they would approach children and rural in rural areas, and just when they go and click photos, they should also have a community service, and they should try and communicate what have they've seen, because they're all good naturalists, and they should try and communicate that to the children from the areas where they're clicking the photos. I wish that more people would speak with their images to children and to adults around them.
I think that's possible. I mean, it's easy to create opportunities, but you also need sponsorships and people with strong commitments to put this into action and execute. Right? Adrian, I have a question about the anglers. It's because of the detailed documentation by the anglers done in the past, which played a very important role when your team of scientists discovered the real status of the humpback marcia. And do you think angling associations are doing enough now to create awareness among them to distinguish between the red-finned marcia and the blue-fin marcia? Because I went online and checked what's the real status after I read the book. I noticed angling is still being promoted as a touristy thing. So are the anglers today aware of what they're catching?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And when the anglers started collecting records, and I must stress, when we're talking about catching fish with a rod and line, all the angling for marcia around South and Southeast Asia that goes on is typically catch and release angling. So the fish aren't taken, they're put back, so they're a renewable resource. They're worth a lot of money to local communities because they bring income in from traveling anglers. And that means, because of their value, the locals then protect the rivers and look after the fish because they're so valuable to them. And prior to that, the locals were fishing for the fish to take them to market. And so an individual fish had a single value. Now the fish have a renewable value. Having said that, angling is no longer allowed throughout much of the Carvery. So these fish don't get fished for anymore, this particular species of marcia. But yes, when the anglers were keeping records, the lack of awareness as to what the species were. They thought they were all the same species, but they were commenting on whether they had blue fins or whether they had orange fins. And then that allowed me to sort of look at the data and realize that the bluefin marcia, which we found out had been stocked into the river, their population was exploding. But at the same time, the humpback marcia, which was meant to be the only marcia in the River Carvery, the population had crashed to critically endangered levels. Yeah, there's 16 species of marcia throughout South and Southeast Asia. And we've had quite a big job educating anglers along the way as well, because there was quite a bit of reluctance early on to believe that the effects of stocking were having this detrimental effect. But anglers and angling clubs seem to be taking that, and policymakers seem to be taking that on board now, and are calling fish by their correct species name. So we've made good progress there, and that can only be a good thing in terms of recording what's going on in the future and monitoring these stocks and which fish need attention more than others, conservation attention.
That's really, I think, good news for us, that there's hope for marcia and a lot more is being done. Maya, as a wildlife illustrator, when you design children's books, do the art director tell you to kind of tweak the real characteristics of the main character and try to animate them and make them more cute and cuddly to appeal to a younger audience? Or do you like, I
No.
mean, when they approach you, they are like clear, no, this is a book on a particular animal and it should be depicted in its natural surrounding with its true characteristics?
No, I've never received any instructions like that so far. And I hope I never will, because I think children should be ideally born in nature. Like I said, they should be exposed to nature. And when they look at nature in its reality, then they are able to see the cute and cuddly for themselves. They can pick out what they feel is cute and cuddly. We don't have to dress up wildlife to appear like a teddy bear or to make it more human, anthropomorphic, and sell it to children, because there is such little exposure to nature as it is that I feel it should be just depicted the way it is. I don't ever dress up my character, because the real character is actually not at all accessible to the children in the real world. And I think that's very important for me to do, is to stay as close as possible, as I possibly can, to the way it really looks. And that's quite a challenge for me to sketch, in fact, but I still do it.
Yeah, and I'm so glad. You know, the results show in the book. Every page, Matisha is just there.
Thank you.
In
Thank you
all
so
its
much.
theory, and you do feel a connect with the fish, and I think that's an important job for an illustrator. So while we are talking about making creatures more appealing to kids, Adrian, do you think because of TV shows and movies, there's a lot of emphasis on the tiger? People are well connective and they have a wider acceptance when it comes to something like the penguin, the lion, the tigers, the elephants. But how is it promoting the cause of Nasir? And I mean, you've been to schools with the Kaveri mission, uh, to promote the cause of Nasir, because I think a whole lot of problems will just get solved if there is awareness about the status of the fish, right? But it is not something which we can see easily, and because it stays hidden underwater and the numbers are low. So what is the how is it promoting the cause of the humpback Nasir?
It certainly is more challenging, and we often use the phrase for things that live beneath the surface of rivers as out of sight, out of mind, policymakers as well as the general public. And when you think about typical conservation icons like the WWF logo of the giant panda and tigers, these are species. So the panda is now vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. Tiger is endangered. So Letitia, the humpback marcia, is far more critical than those species. I mean, this has been done before. People have successfully used fish, like saving, Finding Nemo, and things like that. So it can be done. But yes, certainly more challenging. And I think the best way to approach that is to use fish to make people realize that it's not just the fish that are important. If we pollute our rivers and we no longer have fish in our rivers, that affects everything else as well. Okay, or if our rivers dry up, for instance, all those animals that rely on fresh water to drink, which they all do, other than the marine animals, they would all disappear too. So if you've got no fish in the river, you've got no fish-eating birds like eagles and kingfishers, and a lot of these things that are much easier to draw attention to from a conservation perspective. So yeah, the fish are a critical part of joining up all that wildlife. beauty of working on the marcia is they are quite charismatic fish. They grow really, really big. So that adds interest as well. I mean, the humpback marcia is the largest of all the marcia and grows to the size of a man. So, you know, that's pretty special and impressive about them. So as far as marcia go, they've got a lot going for them rather than other smaller fish species due to their size. They're got in these incredible golden scales and orange fins, and they, in my eyes at least, they are equally as beautiful as any other animal on the planet. And hopefully other people will see that as well when they read the story about Matisha.
So you are doing your bit of conserving the fish, right? And improving the numbers through the marcia trust. So can you tell us a bit more about what they're doing?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I mentioned, there was very little known about marcia. So one of the key things that we've been doing is focusing on the science to make sure we understand properly what the species are and what the status of each of those species is, so we can prioritize which ones need most help. The humpback marcia is the one that needs the most help at the moment. So we've been working throughout the Kaveri River Basin, throughout Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, looking for subpopulations of the humpback marcia, because the river has been divided by dams now, and the bluefin marcia has been stopped, which has completely taken out the humpback marcia in many, many stretches. But through our research throughout the catchment, we've identified 1 or 2 small pockets of remaining populations of humpback marcia, and these tend to be in the high tributary streams, which are isolated by dams. So we're working in those areas to try and ensure that those remaining populations are protected, for starters. That's the most critical thing. But we've also been in discussion with fisheries departments about the possibility of potentially breeding the correct species in captivity to boost numbers. But the priority at the moment is educating people throughout the Kaveri Basin as to the importance of this fish, the fact that we don't want to see this fish go extinct, and trying to make sure that they're protected where they still do exist.
Right. So Maya, thank you for prodding Adrian into writing this book. It's a fine piece of collaboration, and I hope we get to see many more books. Okay. You know, I hope you get lots more, you know, more books, more ideas, and more collaboration.
It's really delightful talking to you. You're a very sensitive and responsive interviewer, and I really enjoyed the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. I would like to tell our viewers that this book is available at the Speaking Tiger website. You can also find it at your nearest bookstore and online stores as well. And you need to know more about the marcia, and if you'd like to contribute, do visit marciatrust.org. Is that website right, Adrian?
It's marciatrust.org.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. .org. Right. So thank you, Maya. Thank you, Adrian. It's wonderful having you both here. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you.